That was great from both of you. Really great, lucky to have you come out. I'd like to open it up for any questions from any of the folks. May I have some? That's a question, but people are always shy. I'll start with one. Both of you have written poems about desire, love. What is the hardest thing about doing that?
Everything. I think it's hard at first to distinguish whether you're writing about perceived intimacy, real intimacy, sex, love, like, so all of those sort of live on the same page, and when I sit down to write, I sort of try to separate them, because I feel like as I've written this book, I've become, or I've realized I'm not very interested in sex. I'm more interested, and I'm not very interested in love. I'm more interested in sort of the gateways to those, I guess, sort of sensually, and that's really hard. Like, it's so hard to even talk about it. It's hard to write about it. I feel like when I've written sex poems, I get very tired of them. When I try to talk to sometimes my students bring in poems that are sex poems, and we talk about why oftentimes they fail. And I think a lot of it has to do with, obviously, sort of received language, received ideas, trying to describe something that is brutal and comic and strange and intimate at the same time. So desire is a funny word. It's an interesting word. I like it. I prefer it to all of those other things. But I think it has its toes dipped into all of those. So I guess, I don't know. I think everything's hard. I think it's really hard to write a love poem. I think it's really hard to write about anything that has to do with, like, the sort of sensual realm.
I mean, for me too. I mean, also, yeah, desire is such a huge umbrella.
Yeah.
You know, is it desire, the sensual desire? Is it, you know, just, I think a good sex poem kind of, I mean, transcends the physical, which is,
Yeah.
you know, the ironic thing about that. But I think it is hard to write about desire, and yet I think that's the main component of just writing. You know, writing in itself is a form of desire. So it's never easy. Even conjuring up that desire to start writing is difficult. But in terms of writing about sensuality, for me, what's hard too is because of the kind of, you know, the sexuality that I do have. I mean, homosexuality is such a hard thing to write just because there's so much taboo in it initially, you know. But I feel like that's why I want to explore it some more, you know. I mean, for me, growing up in such a restrictive immigrant Filipino Catholic background, it's kind of going against that grain. I didn't come out till I was older. You know, I was like, I was 30 actually. And that was actually when, I mean, I was heterosexual for a long time, and then I was bisexual for a little bit, and then
Slowly.
for like a window. So even that was really hard for me, just because from the background that I grew up in, and I'm still exploring that part of desire, sensuality, and now that I'm married, that's a whole different level as well. So it's always tough. And I like what you said about the corridor, you know. I think that is more interesting than the act itself.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
You said that most of your poems are about you or self-portrait. How did you develop your style?
That's a really good question. I I don't really know, but I love that word style. That's another word that I talk a lot with my students, because I think it's not tone, it's not voice, it's that sort of indescribable thing that I feel like it's sort of like how do we develop ourselves, like how do we dress, how do we talk, how do we engage with the world. I feel like that's sort of the act of writing too. Like when you come to the page, you sort of have to figure out how to be a person on the page, kind of like how you figure out how to be a person in the world. And that's really exciting to me, because I don't know about you guys, but I don't remember a lot from my childhood, when you first are in your body, when you first like remember things. And I feel like the act of writing is that every time. So every time you're sort of figuring out differently. I don't know. Style is such a great word. My new poems are very different than the ones in this book. So I thought I had a style, but apparently I don't. But that's the exciting thing. It's like changing your hair color. You know, it's like you can change. You can do whatever you want differently. But I think it's a little indescribable.
What about you?
My style?
Yeah.
I mean, I can say that I'm a narrative poet. I like telling stories. I love hearing stories. I love exploring like the stories of my family and everyone else's. But like Alex, actually, some of the newer stuff that I'm writing tends to be more like lyrical, I guess. You also got to challenge yourself, right? You don't want to be known for. I mean, you just don't want to make it easy on yourself, because that's like lack of rigor, So yeah, I don't really pay much or think much about style, I guess. I don't know if that's.
Ask another one?
Yeah.
How do you step into your personas in your poetry? Because I felt like I was cutting open the fish and cleaning it, and I felt like your father. Like I felt my hand loosening the tie, and I felt myself walking down the street.
Oh, that's so nice.
So yeah, I feel like I got into it. So how do you actually step into the personas when you're writing your poetry?
Tricking yourself entirely. Pretending that whatever happened is entirely something else. I don't know. It's like, that's such a good question. It's like one line will open something, and you kind of don't know what that line opens, and then you just write past that line, and then you go back, and you're like, okay, here's the power, and it's like these 3 lines, and then you like read them, you think about it, and then you go past that. It's I don't really know how, but it's nice that you felt that.
Yeah, I would say it was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be truthful. I mean, for me, that's the most important thing, even when I'm describing something, like how can I describe this event or this color or this situation the best I can in the less words that the most evocative way that I could. So I'm always asking myself, like, is this true in many levels? Is this true factually, like, accurately, and also like in an emotional level, I mean, of course, like the fish gutting, on one hand, it is the physical act of the gutting, right? But then also it's the emotional idea of the, love as something that's very gutting, So that's always like every, if I write a poem, like every line or every moment, I ask myself, is this true? Or is this what I want to convey as truth? Lucia has a question.